Our topical resolutions today, and this one is entitled Racism in Education. The resolution will be moved by CoCab Stewart, MSP, and seconded by Councillor Christina Cannon. So welcome to CoCab.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Conference. I take no pleasure in having to bring this as a topical motion, but after the last few weeks of education and our young people and all the staff and parents that have been subjected to despicable and absolutely disgraceful racist behaviour and abuse, I had no choice. So I am grateful for the opportunity to bring this. Over the past few weeks, we have seen three separate incidents that I want to talk about today. So the first one was actually at the Scottish Learning Festival. So the Scottish Government, being progressive, launching a national discussion on education and all its values of inclusive and diversity. As part of that, there were teachers that presented materials for our teachers to use, looking at making the curriculum more anti-racist and looking at decolonisation of the curriculum. So the very materials that are hopefully going to be used to address these issues were then used as a reason for people to actually come out online and actually racially abuse the teachers that were presenting these materials. So our profession was under threat. The fact that the GTC and Education Scotland, EIS, there have been many organisations that have come out and called it out. And I'm asking Conference to also call out this kind of ridiculous and despicable behaviour.
What, like? So I've already made a video going over the BS from the SNP conference pertaining to the alleged racism that took place at simply poor, innocent teachers who were simply promoting anti-racist materials that promote inclusion and diversity for teachers to use going forward in their learning environments. All year I've been pointing to the fact that they are critical race theorists. All year I've been trying my damnedest to showcase that the Building Racial Literacy programme, with this boot on the screen here being at the forefront, as you can see I'm now blocked because of my evil racism. You know, all year I've been trying to highlight, showcase that they are indeed critical race theorists. I'd say I've done a pretty good job of being able to prove that on my own. However, something's been brought to my attention that I think people might want to see. So, of course, this is Melina here. This isn't actually who we're going to be focusing on too much today. Shock horror, I know. So, if we come back just to refresh people's memories ever so slightly, to the Building Racial Literacy programme itself. And, of course, it starts off, this is Education Scotland. You know, CoCab Stewart stood there at our panel and talked about all these different organisations that came out in defence of the poor innocent teachers who were simply promoting diversion and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, sorry. You know, she mentions all these organisations like Education Scotland, which of course is the one that's where this programme is sort of in development, or they're working together in tandem. And the EIS, largest teaching union in Scotland, which are promoting the same shit, the same grotesque nonsense with Kajida Mohammed more often than not, who's another one of these critical race theorists who sits on government panels, courtesy of the Scottish Government, to promote critical race theory, may I add. You know, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. Nonetheless, so it says here that the National Building Racial Literacy Programme promotes anti-racism as a baseline professional value, empowering educators to identify and implement anti-racist behaviours and processes in their everyday practice, with the ultimate goal of the Building Racial Literacy Programme being to make every educator in Scotland racially literate, effective at dealing with racism and confident in leading anti-racism. Now, I've shown before, courtesy of this programme here, co-constructed with a wide range of partners, including education practitioners and stakeholders on the Scottish Government Race Equality and Anti-Racism in Education programme. The Building Racial Literacy programme has been tested by a first cohort of 88 participants across 27 Scottish local authorities. They're now on to their second round, so you could probably, in theory, double that number now. However, courtesy of this programme here, as I showed many months ago, It said on their website, the Scottish Government's website, that this was critical race theory. They were reforming the curriculum to undertake a critical race theory framework. I've shown, courtesy of the Anti-Racist Educator, which is the background to, if the laptop would stop freezing, that would be lovely jubbly. Standard procedure. This here, this background, because obviously she's blocked me now, but this is the Anti-Racist Educator. Now on this website, which she co-created along with many of the other people who sit on these government panels that I've already mentioned, there's a part, this is the glossary here, there's a section dedicated to building, racial literacy. Gives you a bit of a definition. But on top of that as well, when they say anti-racism, naturally you assume that you're just simply opposing racism. You're against the concept of treating somebody subordinate or beneath you because of the colour of their skin or their racial profile, their characteristics, whatever it may be, right? But then you look at the definitions of racism, something else I've already showcased. I'm not going to go over old ground for the sake of old ground. All this stuff's on my Telegram, all this stuff is in videos as well. All the different definitions of racism they have got a myriad of different definitions of racism. When you understand how they are defining racism, then it all becomes clear that when they say they're anti-racist, it's not what it sounds like. Alright? Anyway, moving on. This section here. What is racial literacy? By racial literacy, the Building Racial Literacy Programme refers primarily to Franz Widens-Twine's definition as a form of anti-racist training, with a recognition of racism as a contemporary, not just historical problem, a consideration of intersectionality, the ways in which racism intersects with other factors such as class and gender, the development of language to discuss race, racism and anti-racism, and the ability to decode race and racial microaggressions. Now this is the part that I want to bring people's attention today. Who is this woman here? Wow. Somebody sent me 2 of her papers. This one here, A White Side of Black Britain. The Concept of Racial Literacy. Ah, ain't that sweet. And there's another one. The Future of Whiteness. A Map of the Third Wave. There she is here. Alright, and here she is. So obviously I'm not going to go through all of this because there's 31 pages on this one here, 22 on this one, and just to give you a bit of an idea as to who we're dealing with here, you know. So, right off the bat, the abstract to this paper here, it says, this article surveys the disciplinary field of whiteness studies and outlines an emerging third wave of research in this international and interdisciplinary field. This article begins by locating the origins of whiteness studies in the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, whatever, who provided the intellectual foundations for this body of scholarship. We then identify 3 characteristics that distinguish this third wave of research from earlier studies. This new wave of research utilises innovative research methodologies, including analysis of racial consciousness biographies, music and visual media, and analysis of the recuperation of white innocence, and reconstitution of white supremacy in neo-apartheid, post-imperial and post-civil rights contexts. And thirdly, or tertiary, analysis of white identity formation among members of racial and ethnic minorities. Whew. Keywords: anti-racism, critical race theory, sociology, whiteness and white supremacy. And then on the other one we've got, just to come down, the abstract for this one is opposition to transracial adoption on both sides of the Atlantic has been based in part on the assumption that white parents cannot understand race or racism and thus cannot properly prepare children of multiracial heritage to cope with racism. In this article, I draw on a 7-year ethnographic study to offer an intensive case study of white transracial birth parents that counter this racial logic. I draw on a subset of data collected from field research and in-depth interviews with 102 members of black-white interracial families in England. I provide an analysis of 3 practices that I discovered among white transracial birth parents who were attempting to cultivate black identities in their children of multiracial heritage. I offer the concept of racial literacy to theorise their parental labour as a type of anti-racist project that remains under the radar of conventional sociology analysis of racism and anti-racist social movements. Keywords again: anti-racism, racism, black identity, interracial families, critical race theory, oxymoronic black Europeans. Well, she sounds like a barrel of laughs, does she not? The concept of racial literacy. Oh, Jesus, man. Now, obviously, I want you to bear in mind that the Building Racial Literacy programme, which is funded by the Scottish Government, which has members of on their panel who are also critical race theorists, including my favourite Boo Boo Melina, and they're taking definitions of this woman here. I think she's a woman. Yeah, just had to clarify that there. I should have done that when I started. But there we go. What a shock. I mean, this is the sort of thing that she's writing about. The study of whiteness and white identities now includes hundreds of books, ethnographies, scholarly articles and reviews that examine the role whiteness and white identities play in framing and reworking racial categories, hierarchies and boundaries, drawing on how racial identities frame and are framed by nation, class, gender and immigration. These new empirical studies of whiteness and white identities pose novel questions that challenge existing historical and contemporary accounts of racial identity construction. The recent research on whiteness focuses primarily on examining and exposing the often invisible or masked power relations within existing racial hierarchies. Right? Just a bit more. It is simply no longer the case, as Margaret Anderson suggests in otherwise an outstanding overview on whiteness. Whiteness, by the way, this fucking nonsense, whiteness. It's always about whiteness. And bear in mind, as I will continue to reiterate, the whole point of me bringing this up is the fact that these people are taking quotations from this woman. They're taking some of the stuff that this woman conjures up and musters up rhetoric-wise and apparently study-wise, and they're implementing it into their Building Racial Literacy programme, or at the very bare minimum, the sort of material that the Building Racial Literacy programme then goes on to generate. Then the teachers who are part of the Building Racial Literacy programme undertake this, then they do their own research, then they become racially literate, then they promote this bullshit into the classroom as they begin to see the world for a different lens, which by extension means your children are being targeted with concepts such as fucking whiteness. That the mechanisms and sites of racial domination and subordination are absent from this area of research. Much of the recent scholarship on whiteness and white identities has moved beyond voyeuristic ethnographic accounts and personal narratives. The field now includes critiques of whiteness that examine the institutional arrangements, ideological beliefs and state practices that maintain white privilege, even as those prerogatives are being challenged by anti-racist social movements, identity politics, multiculturalism and immigration. Oh. The articles in this special edition explore how white privilege is maintained even as the prerogatives of whiteness are challenged by the new interracial social movements, progressive social policies, democratisation projects and multiculturalism. It is these white inflections that nuanced and locally specific ways in which whiteness as a form of power is defined, deployed, performed, policed and reinvented that is the central focus of third wave whiteness. Third wave whiteness? Oh, fucking hell. This third wave of whiteness studies incorporates and builds on existing scholarship on racial identity construction with a particular focus on emerging empirical accounts of how whiteness is deployed and the discursive strategies used to maintain and destabilise white identity and privilege. Much of the recent research on whiteness explores the ideological practices that render white privilege invisible. I will keep reiterating this. This woman is being taken at face value and quoted by the Building Racial Literacy programme. In this third wave, whiteness avoids the tendency towards essentialising accounts of whiteness by locating race as one of many social relations that shape individual and group identity. A third wave perspective sees whiteness as a multiplicity of identities that are historically grounded, class-specific, politically manipulated and gendered social locations that inhabit local custom and national sentiments within the context of the new global village. This exceptional third wave of intellectual inquiry into whiteness is now examined in virtually every branch of the social sciences. because we're lab rats, and so are your children. Social geographers, map how residential proximity of whites to racialized minority groups shape racial attitudes and group affiliations. Oh, given the mobilization of far-right movements throughout Europe and the United States, this line of research is a needed examination of how whiteness and nationalism are used to portray racial minorities as perpetual foreigners, potential terrorists, or permanent cultural outsiders. You know, it's funny though, because I've already read out somewhere throughout this fucking wall of text that immigration, they keep bringing up immigration. Well, they are outsiders. These are our countries. Phew. Education scholars chronicle how whiteness is learned, internalized, privileged, institutionally reproduced, and performed in educational settings. And feminist scholars address how whiteness and gender shape racialized identities and how identity construction and patriarchy are linked to racism, nation and class location. So as I said, I'm not going to go through all of this. If you want the links to this, you can hit me up on Telegram. I will leave my Telegram below. Just ping me a message on my Telegram channel and I'll send you these two publications. It's not a problem. But yeah, I'm not going to delve too much further into this because it was only a quick video meant to be. There she is. Okay. And as I said, this was brought to my attention earlier on today. Her papers, Building Racial Literacy, Education Scotland, right fucking there, Scottish Government funded, and they're taking what this booth has to say by racial literacy. The Building Racial Literacy program refers primarily to Frances Woodin-Twine's definition. Okay? This is the sort of shit we're dealing with here, folks. All courtesy of this cow. Oh. Today. Her right there. Yeah. Peace.